All right, welcome back to Live at 9. Jeff Koinange sitting in for Ann Kiguta. The Gikomba fire tragedy is the 8th in the last 8 years. Joining me live, the Secretary General of Kenya Red Cross, Abbas Gule. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you. As here.
Always, you know, you guys are always just about the first responders. And but you know, it bothers a lot of people that this same place has an average of a fire a year. And you know, it's almost inevitable, like, you know, this year there'll be a fire in Gikomba, and yet we're never prepared.
Yeah, but Jeff, Gikomba is just one. I can tell you, Mukuru, there was another fire yesterday. Luckily this time it didn't affect people, it affected those who are probably selling adulterated fuel. But there are places every week there is a fire, leave alone every year. So, I mean, in many of these towns, especially in densely populated slum areas around the country and across the country. Yes, so Gikomba, unfortunately, as sad as it may be, yes, it has happened and it continues to happen, and I'm sure, God forbid, but it will happen again unless we do something about it.
Could we have prevented it, or could we have averted 15 deaths, 41 serious injuries? Could we have done that?
In fact, 70, there are 8 in ICU at the moment. I don't know whether we can really say, Jeff, that we can prevent. You know, if you talk of all the disasters that we've had in the last 4 or 5 years, some are self-inflicted, some, yes, we could prevent it. Even this one, I think, to some extent, yesterday, as sad it may sound, you know, it started from hardware owners area. This is the same area that had the fire last year, as you said. So, you know, and they're very congested. Today, when we were doing assessment between the government, central, county, and ourselves, there was an announcement that almost 560 stalls were burnt. We don't believe those numbers are correct, and I think we'll have to rework them again tomorrow. The people who died were in these 3 high-rise towers or buildings or properties that are 5-story and 6 stories. We know there are 122 households or families that were caught with this fire, and we know the numbers have died. But, you know, I mean, these areas must be reconstructed. Yes, few years, I mean, last year and the year before, there were promises to reconstruct these areas and to make this area, you know, better constructed, better facilities, better, you know, even entries of the, you know, the fire department and others to have access and all that. In most of these slums, why the numbers become so high of death toll or destruction is just that there is no access to these places. So properly town planning and setting this out properly is something that needs to be done, and done urgently. And
where does the buck stop, SG? Because, you know, we're always talking about. Yes, let's improve this. Let's do that. Where does the buck stop?
Well, I guess, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, one would say it's government, but now with devolution, you know, county government has the first responsibility for disaster management. It's one of the devolved functions. They need to have a disaster policy and disaster plan as a county, and this across the 47 counties. They take the initial responsibilities. If it is beyond them, then they bring in the central government. But whether county or central government, they can't do this on their own. Even within central government, it becomes an interministerial thing. There is health, there is Ministry of Health, there is, you know, provincial administration, that is Interior, Office of the President. There are other ministries that would come in and play. There is, of course, Emergency Fire Department. Now that also is with counties. There are institutions like Red Cross that are enacted by an Act of Parliament, auxiliary to the government, both central and county. There are many agencies. The NYS have also played a major role in terms of putting fires because they had equipment, they have machinery, there's the military. There are many institutions that, if properly and well coordinated, they would do that. But overall responsibility lies with the government, whether central or county.
Well, let me ask you an unfair question. What if this fire had taken part in Muthaiga, say, or Runda or Kitisuru? Would the response...
The perception would be those areas would be responded to very quickly, and people have the right or the entitlement to think what they think. But I guess in terms of responses, response agencies will respond to fires or disasters, whether in slum areas or whether it's in upbeat market areas. Probably on the upmarket areas, there'll be easier access, okay? And maybe one may think then there's a favor on this side, and people have on social media bashed me as a person, bashed Red Cross, bashed my good friend Bob Collymore when we had, you know, we had Westgate. No, we had Westgate, and then there were fires in Gikomba. But you know, some things people don't know sometimes what we do. You look at now in terms of the current floods that just took place recently. The government has put in resources, and sometimes I find the government itself, both central and county, are probably not able to market and explain themselves what they're doing. They're doing tons of work, Jeff. So I would say there will be a perception that the areas are favored because it's perceived to be bourgeois areas, so they'll get assistance very quickly. Yeah. But when we respond to emergencies, and I believe the same with the government, we respond with the same intensity and the same, you know, interest to alleviate suffering and save lives where it may be. Yeah. It could be in Solai, it could be anywhere else.
Speaking of Solai, after the Solai tragedy recently, the government said, you know what, let's set up a disaster management unit. You know, there was that talk, again, talk.
No, and I think government, from what I know, because I'm privy to some discussion, I think there's seriousness in the country now for the government, central government, to set up a national disaster agencies, to have a disaster policy, disaster law, disaster bill. There are things that are coming into place now, because in Parliament, I know, Senate and the Parliament, two houses are working together to develop, you know, by also almost bipartisan, you know, policy on disaster, which Senator Mutula Kilonzo, Senator Sakaja, and others have been leading this discussion. Yeah. And I think it's gone to first reading, now to second reading. Stakeholders have been involved. On the other hand, I'm aware that Cabinet has approved disaster law that is being worked now. So the two processes will come together. And now I know the government is seriously discussing on where to house this properly. You know, if you look at disaster in its entirety, rightfully, in my opinion, it should sit with the Ministry of Interior, and that's where it's being moved gradually, because NDOC, NDMU are housed there on devolution and special program. They are more doing with relief and responding to relief in drought and you know, in disaster in terms of food. But in terms of policy, in terms of response, in terms of coordination, we're working with county commissioners, provincial, regional commissioners, district commissioners, and by extension with the PS Interior, which I think that's rightfully where this place should sit. I mean, this policy.
But is it happening fast enough, or is it going to take another disaster, SG? Is it going to take a disaster you know, where dozens or scores are killed, and then we finally wake up and say, you know what, let's do this right now?
Well, unfortunately, Jeff, sometimes things don't work that fast. But unfortunately, too, in the case of Kenya, this thing has been in the drawing board for many years. I can tell you for free. Kenya developed this disaster, draft disaster law and policy about 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And subsequent governments have not been able to legislate this and have it implemented. We have South Africa, we have Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Ethiopia, who have borrowed from Kenya, and they had legislated theirs. I know South Africa has, in fact, you know, revised it several times since then. So unfortunately, it's taken long, but I want to seriously believe that this time around, it's quite serious, and these two approaches are coming to one area and one common position. And I think if the Ministry of Interior really lead this, then other ministries would fall into this. We talk about ambulance, for example. You know, there was no ambulance policy. So various agencies, Red Cross, St. John's, Ministry of Health, other ambulance providers came together about 3 years ago to try and push to develop an emergency policy also on ambulances. We have lots of vehicles moving around with sirens calling themselves ambulances, but there's just transport vehicles. So we've now come with a clear policy on how do you define the standards of what would be an ambulance. You know, and that, I think now the Minister of Health has just recently approved that, and is going to be, you know, gazetted, and soon we're able to put standards, because it's about standards and measures. Even all of us who claim that we're in this space of disaster management, I mean, we need to be vetted, we need to be verified, and we need to, you know, have the best of the best in responding to emergencies in our beloved country.
Yeah, we need to take it more seriously. A moment ago, you talked about Senator Sakaja. He's already called for the DCI to investigate the cause of yet another fire in Gikomba. The question I'm asking is Could it have been political?
Well, again, I'm not in that space, Jeff, and I don't want to get into that space. I mean, Sakaja, a good friend of mine, he's entitled to his opinion. I also saw the area MP on what he was saying. But I think in this country, we also sometimes, we over-politicize everything. And I think sometimes we just need to reflect. You know, now the people who have lost their lives, bodies have just been taken to the mortuary. There are many fighting for their lives. There are many that have lost their properties and businesses. You know, we should reflect for a moment and not every time, you know, fuel this sentiment that, you know, it's about politics, it's about, you know, arson, deliberate, you know, and I think we should be sober. Let the investigators arm of the government do their investigation, give them the space to do their work. We hope they'll find the cause of this fire, because there are different opinions being provided. But I guess, you know, what I want to say at my age, I'm 60 years old, and I say, even if I speak as an ordinary Kenyan, and not even in my capacity as the CEO of the Red Cross, look, I mean, we have a beautiful nation. And I say this because I have been fortunate enough to live in almost all the 5 continents of this world. Work there, live there, seen it. And I want to say we have a beautiful nation. And, you know, we should tone down this rhetoric. We should work very hard. As we sit here now, Jeff, you know, we're very quick in forgetting. There are floods in many of these counties. There are areas in Tana River, areas in Nyanza and West Kenya that are still underwater now. The Kenyans who have been for the last 2 to 3 months have nowhere to sleep in their own homes. They can't go back because it's flooded. As we talk here now, we have Rift Valley fever. We've had cholera. Rift Valley fever in many counties. In Wajir, in Isiolo, in Marsabit, even a case or in Siaya. And Rift Valley, you know, a fever affects human on one side and then animals. We can manage the human side with county government. I just want to urge county governments and various national ministries, Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock, to have veterinary doctors to go out there, vaccinate. We need vaccines to vaccinate animals so that we don't get infected. What we need to do also, animals should be put on quarantine from these counties so that it doesn't flow into other major places where then we have, you know, a serious disaster on our hands. And this is what we need to be looking at.
Do you think, SG, does it become a little overwhelming for people like the Red Cross? Does it become a little too much? I mean, the burden you bear. The burden you bear, one disaster after another.
Obviously, but you know, we are a nation that is prone to various disasters. You know, we've just had floods now. I said some places have not dried. But at the rate we are going, Jeff, come, you know, August, September, October, some of these places who are now flooded would be in drought. And they'll have shortage of water. We haven't harvested enough water in this country. And it's not for lack of water, it's not for lack of money, it's not for lack of people with the know-how and the knowledge. It's this thing that you call corruption that has, you know, gone haywire in this country. And as a taxpayer, as an ordinary Kenyan, I feel very aggrieved to be just firefighting every time. Yet we have resources, these billions that are said to be looted. Today, we could build these mega dams we talk about. You know, more Kenyans could be drinking clean water. The president and, you know, his appointed, call ministers, call civil servants, call them, you know, PSAs and all that. I think, you know, people should just be thankful they've gotten the opportunity to work for their nation.
And yet they're not.
Well, unfortunately, we know in many cases they are not. And I speak as a taxpayer, having paid taxes for many years in our beloved country. And I feel very aggrieved that I go to firefight all the time. We don't need to firefight. We have resources in this country. I mean, I'm amazed to see how much is being looted, yet this country is still standing.
Absolutely.
You know? And if the president says we have to go through lifestyles audit, I want to be the first one in my organization to be audited.
And yet there's some people who don't want to be. They're saying you're targeting our man, you're targeting a certain community.
I don't care what community, what man, what have you. We have a nation that is larger than all of us put together. And that's what we need to look at. We need to support the head of state. We need to support his agenda. And we all can do it in our organization. I'm doing it in my organization as Kenya Red Cross. We play a role to complement that effort. Because, you know, I remember President Kibaki coming to open the Boma hotels for us when we were talking about Vision 2030. And President Kibaki said, young man, this is the way to go. You actualize Vision 2030 in your respective organization. Citizen group could actualize Vision 2030 from this company and all the other companies put together. We then build a nation. But if we're going to say we wait for the president or the deputy or the ministers, we're going to wait for far too long.
Yeah.
And that is why I'm very proud with Kenya Red Cross. We've gone into business. People say, is it your business to go into business? I say, why not? Because I don't want to wait for handouts from the aid industry globally.
Yeah.
If we can raise resources locally by investing into businesses that is plowed back into the humanitarian work of the Red Cross, then let it be.
Sure.
And I'm very happy I got 10 billion recently, 1 billion shillings from the government through the president directive to go and help those flood victims in various counties, those Kenyans whose homes have been washed away, whether it is Solai, whether it is Tana River or Kilifi or Kwale or Garissa or Kisumu, Siaya, Homa Bay, all these places, sure, people have been affected.
SG, let me bring you back to disasters. And recently, Sarit Center, they say the firefighters ran out of water. I mean, how does that happen? How does that happen?
Well, then for me, if I was managing that department, heads would roll, people would be fired. We would hire professionals, we'll give them resources, because many times they say they're not given resources, many of these institutions. But those empowered, entrusted with this position, each one should carry their sword and their cross.
And yet we're always passing the buck. We're always saying, it's not me, it's not me.
No, someone somewhere has to stop and start taking action. I would actually urge the president to take action, whoever it is. And I'm sorry to talk like this, but I'm very bitter as a Kenyan taxpayer to see the potential for this country.
Yeah.
And then
being wasted away.
Yes.
Being wasted away.
Yeah.
Speaking of responsibility, who should take responsibility for these 15 deaths today? And maybe more, because there's so many, there are dozens in ICU. Who should bear the responsibility for that?
Well, I think it's a difficult question from my perspective. Who should bear? Who is accountable? I think the community themselves are responsible. The heads of various government, because we talk of town planning, how many buildings have collapsed here? They've been built on riverines. They shouldn't be built there. But someone authorized for that building, or someone closed their eyes. There are buildings that 3 years ago after Huruma, one was said that they should be demolished. How many have been demolished? Who has the guts to go and do that? And this is what we should be doing. So people with responsibility would be those in position of power who allow for this infrastructure development in these areas that shouldn't be built on in the first place. And people are given licenses to do trade, to do business. Yes, people should be given space, but we can build better facilities for these people so that they shouldn't be in this risk and this environment. We can't even access most of these places with firefighting equipment because there are no roads, there are no infrastructure. So there are a lot of people who are responsible. Of course, start with the county government, goes to central government, it goes to all of us agencies, and we should take stock of these places and decide if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Don't worry whether I'll be re-elected 5 years or not. And that's why some of us can never go into politics, because it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
I don't need to be in politics to add value to this country.
There you go.
I can be where I am, I add value to my nation from what I do every day.
I wish politicians were listening to you today so that they can think the way you do, because at the end of the day, imagine buildings and businesses built so close to each other.
Yes.
Who allows that?
Well, someone is accountable, and that person must be found and questioned. But who dares question that person, Jeff?
Nobody.
Who dares?
Nobody.
And along the way it goes like that. But in my organization, the buck stops with me, because I have been hired by the board and I report to a president of the society or the chairman of the society, and I then work with my team. The buck stops with me. If something goes with Kenya Red Cross, I'll be the first one to be held accountable, and I'll take that responsibility.
So moving forward, SG, and how do we avoid the next disaster? How do we avoid the next fire?
Because we have not addressed the basics. For as long as we have not addressed the basics, we should be prepared for fire every now and then, around the country, in all slum areas and these densely populated areas that are not properly, physical planning is not done, access is not given, not proper housing, no shelters given. We will expect these problems.
Yeah, I know you have access to the president. I'm sure you talk to him every now and then. But if you were to sit down with him today, after this latest disaster, what would you tell him in a list of 1, 2, 3 things need to be done?
Well, there are people whom he has entrusted with responsibility who have failed him. And they should be held accountable. Whether even if I was the governor too, as a governor, I'll tell Governor Sonko, who is my governor in my county, Nairobi, he should also check his own house as to who didn't do their jobs.
And heads should roll.
Of course. Whether it is the community itself, whether it's those who gave the permits to build those, whether those who are collecting taxes, because these guys say they are paying taxes. They are paying to the county government, or they are paying to whoever they pay to. They have licenses.
Yeah. You know, the saddest thing is we see the pictures of the latest fire and we're almost numb to it. It's like, oh, another fire.
It's another one, yes. It's in the media for 1-2 days and tomorrow it's off the camera.
Correct.
You wait for the next one.
Exactly.
Yes, and we pick politics, who is blaming who is looting from who is stealing from who, and it's all about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who's tangaing.
Yes.
All that. And yet, it's inevitable. The Nairobi city, or I guess the slum areas in the city, is a disaster waiting to happen.
For sure. On sanitation, on health, on water, epidemics, everything. People are drinking almost sewer water in most of these places. And why? We can clean that sewer water. We can clean the riverines. What the late Mzee Mchuki, who had a lot of time for, did in only, in 1 or 2 years. We have forest here, this Globe Cinema roundabout and many other places. Yeah. But you can see now the filth is coming back more and more. And then we always make big statement about it. Let's just get on with this. Let's act and do this. Stop talking.
How can we avoid the noise? Because that's what you're calling it. It's noise.
Of course, it is noise.
Busy talking about
they are polluting the whole place with noise.
Yes. And yet, there's a vision agenda.
Yes.
There are priorities in this country and in this county.
Yes. Agenda, all these 4 agendas. I will just use one example. Last year, as Red Cross, we said we don't want food handouts. 4 years of independence, we can't be giving people food handouts. In Kitui County, last October, November, we gave close to 400 tons of seeds of green grams, dengue. Governor Ngilu called it dengue revolution. It rained, but it wasn't sufficient. Farmers didn't harvest what they expected. Now as we sit talk here, Jeff, Kitui will have a bumper harvest for dengue. Tharaka Nithi, we gave seeds, they'll have a bumper harvest. Meru will have a bumper harvest of dengue, green grams. They're now looking for market. There's no one to buy. And I know, I've said to my good 3 governor friends, they should go to the HE and say if it is the NYS, if it is the military, if it's the police, let them buy from them. Yeah. Because the poor farmer, middleman goes there and buys it at a throwaway price. It's not that they cannot farm. Farmers are already farming. Where do you sell your produce? Who buys it? And where do I get the fair price so that I can actually go farm more? So if we want to really, end food insecurity, poverty, dignified people that they do not sit and queue up for hours, day in, day out, waiting for small gorogoro of maharagwe and maize and all that. Give them, empower them, teach them how to fish. Don't give them fish. And this is the challenge.
And in the meantime, another fire is going to break out in the next few weeks, few months.
Unfortunately, I just told you now, we have, Rift Valley fever. People have died of the Rift Valley fever. Animals have died. And the numbers are increasing. Someone somewhere should put the alarm bells and put a quarantine. Those animals can't come into this because they're going to infect these others. If we eat that meat ourselves, the other day someone says, you have cat samosa now.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes, you do, in Nakuru County.
Yes. So how do we stop even getting this infected animal meat coming into the market?
Grant.
There is somebody that had been given responsibility by the head of state, by the government. And they are accountable.
Did we drop the ball, SG? Did we drop the ball when it came to dealing with disasters? Because we're not proactive, we're reactive.
No, like I said, yes, there was the whole issue of the policy, and it's taken its time. But, we shouldn't live in the past. We should live in the present and future. So whatever has happened, we can correct today. Once now the law is passed, is legislated, and once the policy is done, they come together, and agencies, you need a coordinating body, they should be resourced, we should train people, county government, all the 47 counties have their own disaster law and disaster policy. They are the first responders. Each county can have their own strategic grain reserve. We talk about this National Cereal Produce Board all the time. But if I was a governor today, and I don't want to be one, God forbid, I would have in my county my own strategic grain reserves for my county, because I don't want a single citizen of mine to go hungry. We have people in these towns, in these slums we just talked about. How many do even have one meal a day? And some of us, we even throw food every day. You know, we are not, yes, Kenya is a society that is charitable, is welcoming, is ready to assist, but I think we need to just go back to the drawing board for a lot of these things.
Yeah. You say you wish you were, I mean, if you were a governor, but you don't want to be, but then you speak like a politician or someone who would want to be governor. If you were given a choice, or if you were given a position of responsibility other than where you've been for the longest time, and I know you're comfortable there, would you take it? Go out on a limb.
No, like I said, Jeff, you don't have to be a minister. You don't have to be a PS. You don't have to be a government official or a governor for you to make a difference in the lives of ordinary Kenyans. You can do it from where you are. In the business that you do, you can help. And I'm very comfortable where I am. And I'm going to be there forever. My good friend Atwoli was here a few months ago talking to you and saying, you know, if that guy is doing a good job, Gov't of Red Cross, siwache tu aendelee. Okay?
Yes, yes.
I have done 10 years in this job now. I can walk away today and my conscience will be very clear. Because about 17 years ago, when I first came back to Kenya Red Cross from my mission international, the society had a deficit of 35 million Kenyan shillings. Today, as we sit here, that society is in the positive, not money, but assets, another thing, 3.4 billion Kenyan shillings. Wow. So what is it that we can't do? It just needs honesty, it needs integrity, it needs willpower to do what you have to do. So I am working for my country from where I sit. And I don't have to be a minister, I don't have to be a governor, I don't have to be a politician. And I don't talk one like them, because I'm actually, you know, for me, it's quite emotional, because I have seen lots of disasters, not in this country, but globally. And I've seen what is being done in other places. And I don't think we can be that behind. We can, you know, be among the best in the world. And we have enough resources to do that. We just need commitment, dedication to the mission and to the cause, and for us to deliver.
Yeah. Finally, SG, when your phone rings at 3 a.m.,
yes,
do you put it on silent because you know it's another disaster, or do you pick it up?
I've always had one number, Jeff, one phone number. Like I have one wife. Okay?
Yeah.
So I'm married to my work. That's what my dear wife would tell me, which is largely true. So you can call me 24/7, 365, anytime, anywhere. Whether I'm around the world, I'll pick my phone. And if it's coming from any of my staff or coming from anybody, and you don't need to know me. The best, if I don't pick your phone, maybe I'm in a meeting, you can text me and I will come back to you. If anyone, wherever you are.
Yes, and I agree. I've had that experience with you. If someone was listening to you in Gikomba right now, what would you tell them?
I just want to pass my sympathies to those who lost beloved ones. It is sad, it should never happen, but as a human being, as a Muslim, I would say, and God-fearing person, God knows best why this happened. We should not look for other excuses, but just to say, God be with those who are in hospital. I hope and pray that they have speedy recovery. Burns are not easiest things to deal with, especially like we know they are serious and severe ones. We saw what happened in Sinai some few years ago, and people are still living with that trauma. This is almost a lifetime trauma. So I pray to Lord Almighty to give them the courage. For those who lost loved ones and for those who are in hospital, may God give them quick recovery, and we as Kenyans need to help them. I can tell you also for free, at 5:26 this morning, the PS Kibicho had sent me a text and told me, Abbas, we need to act, we need to help those affected. As a central government, they've given us resources in the past. I'm sure they'll give resources. The same thing we did with Solai. We need calm mind, we need coordination between the central government, the county government, and other actors like ourselves. And I'm sure these people should be assisted. I'm not going to now launch appeals here and there, because the government has been ready central government to give resources to help in such situations. Yes.
Basculet, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Asante sana.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Kenya Red Cross Secretary General Basculet there, talking candidly about how we can respond to disasters, not just in this county, but across the country, being proactive rather than reactive. Plenty of news ahead. We're going to take a quick break. Business news, sports, World Cup update as well. Stay with us live at 9. And keep tweeting at Koinange Jeff, at Citizen TV Kenya, #live at 9. Take a break. Come back in a little moment. Stay with us.